Trump ran away from reporters on the White House lawn after a private call involving Putin this Saturday, May 9, 2026. Trump was at the center of an urgent negotiation between Russia and Ukraine, with a 3-day ceasefire, suspension of military operations, and an exchange of 1,000 prisoners from each side. In the reports making the rounds, the image of Trump quickly walking away became a symbol of the controversy, but behind the scenes it points to something bigger, a direct attempt to use Putin's need on Victory Day to force a real pause in a brutal war that has already destroyed families, cities, and the daily lives of millions of people. I'll tell you all about it in a moment, but right now you'll want to be subscribed to the channel to stay well informed with real-time information in the best journalistic quality ever seen, following the credibility standard of Alves. The maneuvering took place in Washington, at the moment when Trump was answering questions from the press and made it clear that the conversation about Russia and Ukraine was not just another campaign speech. Reuters reported that Trump announced a ceasefire from May 9th to 11th between Russia and Ukraine, with a suspension of military activity and the exchange of 1,000 prisoners of war on each side. Zelensky confirmed the announcement made by the United States and said that preparations for the exchange should move forward quickly. Russia also accepted the pause during the period related to the celebrations of the Soviet victory in World War II. And there is the main point. Trump left quickly because war does not wait for a press conference. A president who tries to create an opening between Moscow and Kyiv cannot turn every sentence into a spectacle for reporters. The private call with Putin, seen by critics as suspicious, can be interpreted much more simply. Trump opened a direct channel with the man who commands the military machine. In war, those who want results talk to the decision makers. Real diplomacy doesn't come from rehearsed lines in front of the cameras. It comes from pressure, calculation, silence, limited concessions, and public demands after the agreement is made. The Russian request had a clear reason. Putin wanted to hold the Victory Day parade in Moscow, in Red Square, without the risk of Ukrainian attacks during the ceremony. For Moscow, this parade was not just a demonstration of strength, historical memory, and internal control. The celebration took place under heightened security, with fears of drones and in a reduced format. The Associated Press reported that the parade was smaller, without heavy weapons, for the first time in almost 2 decades, at a time of prolonged war and concern about attacks. Trump recognized this weakness and turned Putin's need into a bargaining chip. That's the key. If Putin needed calm to display power in Moscow, Trump used that interest to create a pause that would also serve Ukraine. The truce was not presented just as a favor to Russia. It came along with a concrete humanitarian exchange, 1,000 Russian prisoners for 1,000 Ukrainian prisoners. For families waiting for news about captured soldiers, this is not a minor detail. This is real life. It's people coming back home. It's a glimpse of humanity within a brutal war. Zelensky tried to turn the episode into a political provocation. The Ukrainian government issued a symbolic decree allowing the Russian parade on Red Square and excluding that area from Ukraine's plan for using weapons during the ceremony. The British press treated the gesture as direct irony against Moscow, but even with the provocative presence, Zelensky accepted the main framework put together by Trump. Temporary pause, prisoner exchange, and openness to new talks. In other words, each leader tried to sell the story to their own audience, but the central mechanism was driven by Washington. The human cost explains why this ceasefire matters. The UN Human Rights Mission in Ukraine reported that by February 2026, more than 15,000 civilians had been killed and more than 41,000 injured since the start of the large-scale invasion in February 2022. In March 2026, at least 211 civilians died and 1,206 were injured, a 49% increase compared to February. These numbers do not include the full military dimension of the war, but they show why even a short pause can have strategic and humanitarian value. The White House needed to move beyond rhetoric e colocar alguma coisa de pé. Since the beginning of the war, many Western leaders have promised support, aid packages, sanctions, and tough statements. Trump tried another approach, calling Putin, talking to Zelensky, and forcing a public test. The Moscow parade also revealed the pressure on Putin. A leader who needs to scale down a traditional military ceremony, block mobile internet in some areas, and strengthen security against drones. Não está em posição confortável. Al Jazeera reported that Russia cut mobile internet in Moscow and other cities, citing concerns about drones before the May 9th parade. This shows that the war has reached the symbolic heart of Russian power. Trump did not ignore this point. The next steps are delicate. The 3-day ceasefire needs to be upheld on the ground, where Russia and Ukraine have already exchanged accusations of violations during previous pauses. Prisoner exchanges require lists, transportation, verification, and coordination between military and diplomatic teams. After that, Trump tries to turn a short pause into a test for something bigger. It's not a definitive peace, it's not an automatic end to the war, but it's a practical move in a war that was stuck between attacks, retaliation, propaganda, and territorial deadlock. In history, a short ceasefire often starts as a limited gesture and becomes a way out for bigger conflicts. In the Korean War, Dwight Eisenhower took office as President of the United States with the promise to seek a way out of a stalled, costly, and bloody conflict. The negotiations had already dragged on for years, but the combination of military pressure, tough diplomacy, and negotiations over prisoners paved the way for the armistice on July 27, 1953. The agreement did not bring perfect peace, and the peninsula remained divided, but it ended organized fighting, established a demilitarized zone, and dealt with the repatriation of prisoners. This example helps to understand Trump's logic. Not every limited truce is minor. Sometimes it's the first real break in a war that seemed impossible to stop. Other international negotiations also show that private behind-the-scenes talks are not a scandal in themselves. At Camp David, in 1978, Jimmy Carter brought together Anwar Sadat and Menachem Begin in closed negotiations that paved the way for the agreement between Egypt and Israel. In Dayton, in 1995, United States diplomacy brought the leaders of Bosnia, Croatia, and Serbia to an air base in New York far from immediate public pressure. And from there came the agreement that ended the Bosnian War. These cases were not hammered out in a non-stop press conference. They were made in controlled environments. Trump spoke with Moscow because Moscow controls troops, attacks, and demands. He spoke with Kyiv because Ukraine needs to accept any pause that has a real effect on the battlefield. And he quickly left the reporters because at that moment every public word could disrupt a still delicate negotiation. The mainstream media wanted an awkward scene. Trump delivered a decision. Stop the shooting for 3 days, get prisoners out of captivity, and test who is willing to turn symbolism into results. Putin wanted to preserve Victory Day. Zelensky wanted to recover prisoners and maintain his position before his own people. Trump saw both interests and worked out a possible solution. This is Milson Alves News, and my purpose is to keep you well informed with the truth every day. The news links are in the video description. Like this video, subscribe, and check the comments at the end to stay engaged with the Milson Alves community.